Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. For those who didn't see the announcement on Twitter, this is probably not the two people you expected to see, but Steven and Tyler did go to the game in LA in which the Chargers lost to the Lions 41-38. We'll get on to everything and more, but first I'm here with my guy Arjun. Arjun, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. First of all, it is Diwali, so for all my Indian people in the chat and in the fan base, happy Diwali. But obviously didn't get a super fun outcome today, but I think overall it was still a pretty fun game for both teams. And like this is the kind of football game we have kind of expected for the Chargers, just a lot of shootouts and didn't fall the Chargers' way. But I'm so glad we got a good game.
Yeah, happy we got a good game today. From that standpoint, I guess, this was kind of going to be the test for the defense because I think we did a lot of, narratives in recent weeks with is the defense fixed against the Bears? Is the defense fixed against the Jets as well? But I don't know. This was going to be the test against that offensive line, and I don't know. They just kind of got pounded today. I don't know. People are telling me to fix my mic. Sorry, I was on the wrong mic.
All right. People can let me know in the chat if that sounds better.
That's better. That's much better.
Okay, that sounds better. Sorry, I was on my camera mic for a second there. My bad. But no, I thought that this was the game where we were kind of find out how real this defense was to some extent. And no, it was just disappointing coming into this game to get that result. But what were your initial thoughts on the game, Arjun?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head. Like I even talked about it in my video. Like I wanted to react to an extent to the Raiders and Jets games, but also know that like this was the true litmus test. Like had they really turned a corner, like my expectation was like, okay, below 28 points would be a good outcome, and they gave up 41. They damn near gave up 28 in the first half. And like to put it in perspective, so Lions averaged a 0.43 EPA per play. That's a 99th percentile outcome. They averaged a 56% success rate. That's a 96th percentile outcome. Like, obviously, like you don't need me to tell you the advanced stats. They put up 41 points and got stood up at the goal line. So it really should have been closer to 44 or 48, right? It was just a pathetic defensive performance. It just didn't look like they were prepared at all. Goff was eating them up on those in-breaking routes. They couldn't tackle. It was just a really poor performance overall. They didn't even, I don't even feel like he got hit at all in the pocket. The pass rush, that 8 sacks they had on the backup Jets offensive line, obviously it's not going to translate to a top 5 offensive line. So all the talk about, everyone, they're all back, Bosa's playing well, Max playing well. They go up against a legit offense for the first time in a couple weeks, and they got absolutely demolished.
Yeah. This Lions offensive line, I started watching them in the first quarter, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be something different today because the Chargers defensive line was getting pushed back like 5 yards. It felt like on every run play, and for all the hype to some extent about Bosa, Thule, and Mack, who again you don't want to take credit away from what they did last game. Still a terrific effort, but Penei Sewell lockdown, Taylor Decker lockdown on the other side, and the interior led by Frank Ragnow. Like they were amazing today from the Lions standpoint. And so when you're not getting the pass rush, And this secondary is what the secondary has been. Michael Davis also illness. I think he came in the second drive and then didn't play the rest of the game, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what the final snap count ended up being on him?
Yeah, he has 5 snaps.
Yeah, so he sat the first drive, came in the second drive, and then went back out. So that was a little strange, not what I expected. I don't know. Yak is really what this team struggles with, particularly when Ben Johnson and, we saw this with Mike McDaniel also, like, are able to get those favorable matchups. And you have Sam Laporta running wild. You have Amon-Ra running wild, Gibbs earlier in that game. And it just felt like the Chargers kind of weren't going to have a response. So I wanted to see them get like one defensive stop, even if it was kind of a lucky turnover. But this game was just tough to watch defensively. I don't think this is, necessarily the mean of what it is, but for this to be a game where you kind of had to have it on defense, I think this goes to Brandon Staley. Look, this is the 4th game of the season where the Chargers have allowed 475 plus yards. That is out of 9 games now. And, ultimately that's just like not going to be a playoff formula. Obviously you have a lot of teams and the Chargers can kind of scrap back on offense, and credit to Kellen Moore for like turning it around for relative to what this offense had been in the last couple of weeks. But Brandon Staley talks a lot about complimentary football, and the defense certainly was not complimentary tonight. So I expected a much better effort in that regard from the secondary. Ben Johnson realized pretty quickly he could pick apart the linebackers. That was almost like instantaneous. One of the lessons of this game, credit to Kenneth Murray for playing well previously coming into this game. I think he had a weird injury thing and then he came back in. But it was pretty relentless on both Kendricks and Murray. And so I don't know. There wasn't an area of this defensive game plan for Staley where I just felt like he could win, I guess, based on how the Lions had set everything up. And we never saw that adjustment. Even in the Chiefs game, as bad as that first half was, it felt like the Chargers kind of made the adjustment of like, all right, we're going to press a little bit more. Derwin's going to go after Kelsey kind of one-on-one a little bit more. We're going to kind of shut that down as much as we can. And for there to not even really be that adjustment in this game, even a little bit, it just hurts when Herbert had the game he had with, Keenan Allen for a quarter and a half of the game, maybe. Then he comes back in for Quentin Johnston to kind of have the game that he had for a little bit. And for the offense, you put up 38 points, you expect to win in this league. And so I think we got to start with talking about the defense, and that falls on Staley now, because I think you've seen 2 games against 2 premium offensive coordinators in the league in McDaniel and Ben Johnson, where frankly his unit has been fully outclassed.
Yeah. I just tweeted this out, but the Chargers generated 5 pressures in this game. 2 from Mack, 1 from Austin Johnson, 1 from Nick Williams, 1 from Thule. Of those 5 pressures, though, 3 of them were considered cleanup pressures. So they weren't even like true pass rush wins that, turned into pressures. So like you're not able to generate pressure. You're having coverage busts all over the field. Amon-Ra's running wide open in the middle of the field. Khalil Freeman's first play of the final drive, just a wide open shallow crosser. No one's even near him. And then, like you said, like the last 4th down, like I honestly don't mind running a soft zone there, because like, the Lions are our team that just destroys man. Like they don't destroy man. I think like Goff's EPAs against man has been not that great, but in like a high leverage situation, Ben Johnson's probably going to call mesh or like some type of shallow crosser to free up Laporta or Amon-Ra. So I don't mind calling mesh where you could have guys in those zones to kind of pass those shallow crossers off, but they just didn't. Like Kenneth Murray literally just stood there and he let Sam Laporta walk right across his face. And that's really just the story of the Chargers defense. Like you swap Eric Kendricks for Drew Tranquil. Yeah, you're going to get better run defense wise. It didn't show today, but like overall, they've been better run defense wise. And you're going to just struggle in coverage across the middle of the field because Kendricks is not that athletic anymore. He's not able to cover those tight ends and running backs or just play zone like he used to be. So, I know everyone wants to talk about that improved run defense, but at what cost, right? The Chargers are a bottom 5 pass defense by most metrics. And it's just not worth it. Like that trade-off between run and pass wasn't worth it. And we kind of saw today where there was no resistance at all from the pass rush or from the coverage unit.
Yeah, I mean, you can be as good of a run defense as you want. Like, I mean, we saw this in the first week of the season against the Dolphins, right? It's like, the Dolphins had that kind of first successful drive with Raheem Mostert a little bit, didn't run the ball the rest of the game because they realized what they could get over the middle of the field, which kind of to some extent feels like what the Lions did in this game with Jahmyr Gibbs. Kind of went to him in the first half a little bit early, got him a couple targets, and he broke off that one big one and got in the end zone before halftime. But, then the rest of the game, they were just like, all right, well, if you now have to kind of mind the run game after they established it a little bit in the first half, there just kind of was nothing, to be done in the second half other than give up a 75-yard rushing touchdown to David Montgomery, which, just like isn't a great look in terms of allowing explosive plays, which I'm sure there will be civil discourse when you tweet the explosive plays chart tomorrow.
Hell yeah.
As always. But we had a good couple weeks of that against the Bears and the Jets, but now it's a little bit back to reality in that regard. But yeah, as Dower says in the chat here, it's like you needed one single stop in this game, and you just never got it. So, it just feels like this defense in particular, outside of Staley specifically, who, is the architect of this defense and everything that he's built, it's an amalgamation, I feel like, of all the problems they've had this season. You mentioned the thing with the linebackers and, the trade-off that they've made there in terms of improving the run defense. But you also have Kenneth Murray and clearly an older Eric Kendricks in pass coverage now. And that has not worked out nearly to the extent that I think Chargers fans maybe thought it would entering this season in terms of the trade-off. Maybe it would give them in signing Kendricks and the secondary now without JC Jackson, with that situation kind of blowing up like it did. Now you are left with Asante Samuel Jr., who has been playing much less hot over the last month than he did the first month. And Michael Davis, who unfortunately was ill in this game, hasn't had his best season either. And we're trotting Dean Leonard out there, who, credit to him for trying today. He broke up a touchdown, got burnt on, I'm sure, a bunch of other plays. But, this is just not the optimal defense that you want when, you're spending as much as they are in the edge room, you're spending as much as they are in that defensive line as a whole, to get kind of owned by the Lions today as they did, and still have the issues that they have at the second and third levels of their defense. And from a game plan standpoint, it just didn't feel like they were prepared coming into this game, which is probably, again, the third, fourth time you could kind of say that about a Staley defense this season in a premium offensive matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it's just frustrating because, I remember having a conversation with Tyler before the season started, just on the phone, and the season's literally playing out how we said it would, where this offense would be a top 10 unit, which it has. They show that today, that even with all the injuries, they can still put up points with Herbert, but the defense would just let them down because they really didn't they ran back the same unit that struggled for most of last year. They got older. They, pretty much lost one of their best players in Drew Tranquil. And yeah, like you talked about Ben Johnson, Ben Johnson is just one of the best coordinators in terms of attacking weaknesses. And the Chargers coming into this game were the second worst team in terms of defending the middle of the field by EPA numbers. And they just relentlessly attacked that all game. And even it sucks even worse when the Chargers couldn't stop the run. And, you have Montgomery rushing for 116 and Jahmyr Gibbs rushing for 77. And Montgomery's breaking off a 75-yard run. Come on, he's not that fast. And it was did you see the clip of how far back Alohi Gilman was playing on that play?
No, I didn't see the clip, but I would assume that they were playing pretty far back.
Yeah. So they snapped, the Lions snapped it at the 25. Alohi Gilman was standing at the logo, so 25 yards back, until he was still there until Montgomery crossed the first down marker. So at least 10, 15 yards down the field. That's when he started pursuing them. It was just it was such an awful run fit by everyone on that play. And it's just that's just the that just epitomizes what the Chargers defense is. This just never comes together all at once against a good team. I guess the last time we saw that was the Dolphins last year, but that was like the perfect storm, and we just haven't. I don't think they've replicated it since.
No, and I think in particular this game, I mean, this season, we saw the first game of the season against the Dolphins where, the Chargers kind of get blown out. Obviously, there was, the stuff where they tried to play a little bit more man than zone. We kind of got beat whatever way they did it. There were the couple big plays that they gave up against the Titans. And then really ever since that Titans game, Staley has consistently talked about at every point, preventing the big play. We are going to, drop everybody back. And like, people like Ben Johnson are going to tear that apart when they have Sam Laporta and they have Amon-Ra St. Brown and these guys who are, Sam Laporta 8th in the league and Yak 10th in the league, Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Like those guys can separate and they know that they can get those yards after catch. So I just think that it was a mistake, kind of like the Chiefs first half also for, the Lions offense a little bit more dangerous in terms of the weapons they have in that regard than the Chiefs, I think, on paper outside of Kelsey. But for the Chargers to, still do that in this game and never really adjust, granted, it was hard with the Michael Davis situation also. And then, the stuff that happened with the linebackers and just not getting any pressure, which is not going to help the secondary out also. So it was a combined bad defensive effort. But I was just kind of struck that Staley just kind of keeps coming in with the same plan against teams that have shown that, like, they know how to beat that plan and they know how to beat it fairly early in the game. So that was, the disappointing part of this like Staley game plan, if you will, to me, because we could talk about the defensive performers and we've mentioned a bunch of them who like didn't show up on defense today. But I just don't think they're being put in good positions either.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was trying to just do some quick math. So Chargers gave up 8 passes of 15 or more yards. Normally I define explosive as 20. So just by like the box scores I'm looking at, 8 plays of 15 or more yards and then 4 rushes of 10 plus yards. Average yards before contact for the Lions, 3.9. 3.9. That's more than the Chargers averaged overall. So it's like what are like nothing worked on defense. It was just a pathetic performance all around. Like it's the whole, and like I've stayed away from kind of talking about the whole scheme and everything, but when your scheme is built on stopping explosive plays and you don't stop explosive plays, it's just like I don't know what I just don't understand what the plan is, what they're calling. They run like they came into this game with the 3rd highest amount of too high post snap coverages, which is meant to kind of stop explosive plays, yet they're at the top of the league in terms of explosive plays anytime they play a good offense. So yeah, just disappointing. The Lions offense stayed on track. They were explosive on almost every drive, and I'm pretty sure every drive went into Chargers territory except for the last one before half. So
yeah, and I'll also just say, like, I don't know what the expectation is of having that like Staley masterclass game, right? Like we saw this against maybe Detroit last year. I would even say San Francisco, against Miami last year in San Francisco, where, Staley took some pretty like undermanned defenses, mixed up some hybrid coverages, and like played a pretty good defensive game. So it's not like Staley is incapable, as Steven has said on this podcast before, of like calling that type of a game. But I just think this year there's just been actively putting defense in those positions that they don't really deserve to be in. And then obviously, from a talent standpoint, I think they were also, overwhelmed by the Lions today. So that played a part in it too. But no, just frustrating on the whole. Do you have any other thoughts on the defense before we get into anything else?
no, I think we exhausted everything.
Yeah. There's nothing new to say about the defense, but it's just like the offense can, pick it up. I think Keenan, obviously had a great game. We'll get to that stuff in a second. But it's just like, I don't know how you're supposed to beat the Ravens, how you're supposed to beat the Bills, how you're supposed to beat the Chiefs again. Like these teams that they play later in the year with this type of a defense. Like, and it's again, like as close as the Chargers are to kind of being like, or what should be a talented team, on paper, this defense is kind of going to be what holds them back. And when you're someone like Brandon Staley, who was brought in to fix the defense, and it's still not fixed, that's about all I can really say there. All right, let's turn to the offensive side of the ball. I think we have to start with Justin Herbert. What a phenomenal game. To do this without Keenan Allen. I don't know if someone can say if Staley mentioned it in the presser. Obviously, I haven't watched the pressers as to what Keenan Allen's injury is, if that ever comes out. But he was able to come back into the game for what it's worth. But Herbert, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 114.9 passer rating, 323 yards. Played as perfect as you can ask for, given the circumstances. Obviously, a lot of that coming to Keenan Allen, who had 11 receptions for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just an absolutely insane turning back the clock game for Keenan Allen, much like his Vikings game from earlier this season. Quentin Johnston getting involved. He had 4 receptions for 34 yards, a touchdown, and I think 45 pass interferences drawn to get him kickstarted in this game. But yeah, Justin Herbert, to come into this game with essentially just having Keenan, Guyton, Johnston, Everett exits this game with an injury as well. To him, to have as much of a skeleton squad as he kind of had coming into this game, and Keenan leaving mid-game, this should dispel any of the notion that he's not capable of carrying a team, or the Twitter argument that the the high premium talent on the Chargers offense is what is carrying Herbert from week to week, and he's not able to win with Mike Williams, who other people don't realize hasn't played in 8 weeks. But so what a game from Justin Herbert. I honestly was a little bit scared at the beginning, just in terms of it looked like he was leaving a couple balls short. It looked like the finger was kind of still bothering him, and Romo pointed out a number of times in the broadcast until later in that game, how resistant they were to going under center, in particular with the finger, which I still think probably is a thing coming out of this game. But Justin Herbert just on fire when he rolled out to the left and just hit Quentin Johnston square in the chest to kind of extend that drive. It just felt like he always had an answer, for this Lions defense. Tough game for their secondary as a whole, but it felt like once it started to click for Herbert, I would say before halftime, he just never let up. So credit to Justin Herbert, and this offensive effort will be forgotten to some extent because of the result. But I think you have to shout him out off the top here first for how well he played in this game, which is better than anyone, including myself, given the circumstances of the Chargers wide receiver room and the offensive line coming into this game, could have expected.
You didn't even mention the worst part about all of this, and it was the Chargers run game, especially on early downs. So, like I said, Chargers averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Obviously, that one goal line sequence where it took them 7 plays from the 1 to get in was just pathetic. Averaged 0.9 yards before contact, so offensive line wasn't doing anything. On first and second down, they had a success rate of 27% on designed runs, which is a bottom 25th percentile outcome. So, down wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, tight end 1. Keenan leaves for a couple drives. No help from the run game, and Herbert still balled. I think this was one of his better performances, probably up there with the Vikings game. And outside of that 1 interception, I thought he was phenomenal. Was distributing the ball all around. I think at one point, he had 21 or 22 pass attempts, and 17 were targeted to Keenan and Eckler. And then he started to get Guyton more involved. He got Quentin Johnston more involved, who I thought both played pretty well. Guyton had that one nice catch that he turned upfield with some yak, but story of the offense is obviously Justin Herbert really just putting the team on his back and throwing some absolute seeds down the field. And I think I was worried a little bit with you about the accuracy issues, but that definitely corrected himself. He definitely corrected himself over the course of the game, and I think by the end of the game, it was the Herbert we were accustomed to.
Yeah, there were some insane throws in this game where even the television angle looked like that wasn't even supposed to come close as it did. The one where QJ spun around and drew the pass interference and bobbled it. I was surprised that the ball was even zipped in a way that it was possible for him to catch. There were a couple of those really great throws in this game from Justin Herbert, and kind of when you compare it to him as a quarterback in the last couple of weeks that had told on him, as he said himself, missed Keenan Allen a couple times, and sort of had some of those throws that he wished he could have back. For him to have this kind of game was just really impressive. And obviously, even in a loss, like to not take Justin Herbert for granted, because that guy is, I have him as a top 2 quarterback in the league. I know a lot of people agree, whether you think he's, top 5, top 10, but that guy just, for him to come out in this game and probably have his best game of the season under the circumstances, I would say you could argue that with Minnesota. But yeah, this to me was the best Justin Herbert effort, particularly in like one half of football where he just had to absolutely have every throw because certainly the defense wasn't getting any stops. It was just really impressive to see that from him today. And as far as the run game that you mentioned, I don't know what the move is to do at this point. I definitely think they're feeling the loss of Corey Linsley. I definitely feel that Austin Eckler is clearly not what he, was prior to the ankle injury. Since he's returned, I posted that stat earlier this week, but he is performed kind of like a bottom 10 running back out of about 50 running backs, graded in that span in offensive grade, rushing grade. Also, has had drops as a receiver, which is not something we're accustomed to seeing from Eckler. Averaged 19 carries for 67 yards, 3.5. The whole running game as a whole, 3.5. Isaiah Spiller inactive prior to this game, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But yeah, they just had really no momentum again for really the 5th straight week.
Yeah. Alex, as mainstreamers, we do need to push the narrative that they need to run the ball, even when they're averaging 3.5 yards per carry, though. So yeah. even though they were a below average rushing team today, they should have ran the ball more because running the ball wins games, obviously.
I just I don't know. It just feels, it starts, we talk about just the Chargers starting drives, and when they start a 1st and 10, it's a 1 or 2 yard gain with Eckler or Kelly. And there were probably felt like 4 or 5 drives in a row at some point that just started with like an automatic loss play. And, Daniel Popper's talked about not only the fact that they're not rushing for yards, but like their rushing success rate is like really low too. And that puts you behind the chains and consistently needs Herbert to kind of like bail you out. So I don't know. I don't know what like the fix to this run game is. Clearly, Corey Linsley is not coming back anytime soon. Austin Eckler, I hope that he can like rebound in some way, but like clearly we have a large enough sample size now to say that like this is kind of the player he is this year. So I don't know what the solution is other than maybe they get a little bit better when they start like going under center more and not having to run as much out of shotgun. Like maybe that's something that can like stylistically help them. But outside of that, like I don't really know what the fix to this run game is.
I think, the fix could the easiest fix is like the passing offense becomes so good that teams are just running lighter boxes against the Chargers and it makes it easier. But yeah, Linsley can't be that big of a loss now that everyone's had that much chemistry and time. Like, it's like this offensive line has been pretty healthy outside of Corey Linsley. Like, no one's even I feel like left for a drive or for a play. And yeah, Steven's kind of talked about he doesn't think the Chargers marry their run schemes well together. He thinks they're running more outside with Eckler and more downhill with Kelly. Or vice. I think that's what he put it as. And when you run 2 different schemes, it kind of makes it tougher to develop a rhythm. So maybe it is that, but that's also an issue that if you're not able to have a running back room that all aligns with one specific scheme and you have to call different, if you have to call outside zone for Eckler versus duo for Kelly, that's a problem, and that should have been addressed in the offseason when you hired Kellen Moore. And the big reason we heard Staley wanted Moore is because he married the run and pass game together. Obviously, my biggest benchmark with Moore was how good is his passing game going to be? Can he elevate the ceiling of his passing game, which I think he has. But yeah, I think the run game has been very disappointing. Coming into this week, they had a 23.8% success rate after week 2, which is by far the worst mark in the league. Austin Eckler was averaging 2.6 yards per carry since week 2, which is dead last among all running backs. And it's only going to get worse. I mean, like I said, they averaged a 30% rushing success rate today. So it was another pretty bad performance. And like you said, I don't know what the exact fix is going to be outside of really just you go like you do what the Bengals do and just abandon the run at times and just launch the ball down the field, or like just throw the ball. But the Chargers are just so banged up with their skill position players. I don't even know if that's the right answer.
Yeah, I do feel like they have to like abandon running the ball at points. And like as much as that kind of like stinks to say, because again, like Staley's whole philosophy again has been marrying the pass and the run, and Kellen Moore is like based on that too from when he did in Dallas. You know, you're in these games, and we're in this game today because of Herbert throwing, right?
Mhm.
Like, and Herbert threw them into that game with Keenan Allen having the effort that he did. And to me, I just don't think you can like continuously kind of bash your head against the wall and like hope that like it fixes itself. I think later in the game they started to get that memo, particularly just when they were trading drives with the Lions back and forth near the end there. And I don't remember Eckler having many carries in the fourth quarter. But yeah, it didn't seem like he had much compared to the first 3 quarters for sure. But I don't know. Like, I do think this is going to be a problem to the point where like you just can't like rely on it anymore. And it kind of stinks because of what this run game should have been in theory with the offensive line that they came into the season with. But yeah, I also think you have to make the defenses respect your pass, even if you're down Josh Palmer, you're down Mike Williams. And they started to do that in the second half. So I hope that like if you can get this kind of production from Keenan, from Quentin, continuously, that it kind of makes the defenses maybe, like you said, put lighter boxes there and kind of focus on that. But until they do, like this run game clearly has shown that they're not able to churn those yards out themselves. So let's move on from the run game to something more positive. Certainly, what do you think of the game that Keenan Allen had today?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, he was really toasting anyone off the line, anyone who was guarding him. I thought him and Herbert were on the same page. The over the shoulder catch on the left sideline was amazing. The yards after catch, I mean, man, he's really turned back the clock, I think, in that department. And I was someone who I thought he was slowly declining last year, especially after the Raiders game, where I thought Amik Robertson was locking him up, but he's really looked good this season. And I think that like, obviously they've missed Mike, but if Keenan were the one to have gotten hurt for an extended amount of time, I don't know what this offense would be, just because of his ability to get open on third down, his ability to just win off the line. They don't have that with any other receiver on the roster, even like Josh Palmer. So I was really impressed by him. Obviously, this is one of his better games of the season. It probably comes second to the Vikings game, but it was a needed performance, especially early on when none of the receivers were really doing anything, and he was the one who had like 7 catches for 80 yards at halftime, and it took the other receivers a little bit longer to get going.
Yeah, for sure. And I was kind of the same mindset as you. Not that like Keenan Allen was like washed per se, but it was just like coming into this year, does he still have that explosiveness? Also, I think the big storyline was like, can he avoid that like hamstring, soft tissue type injury, which is, obviously held him back a lot last year, kind of coming in and out of the lineup. But, he finished last season strong and has kept it up this season, with the amount of over 80 plus yard games he has. This was just something, even last week in a performance against the Jets that doesn't pop off the screen statistically, going against Sauce Gardner, Michael Carter, and all those guys, and having, I think 4 of his 8 receptions against that Jets trio was like really impressive. And so for him to kind of come into this game and have the effort he did was awesome. I, like you said, did not expect him to kind of become the yak threat or that guy that he has, or, Keenan Allen, you don't associate him having 15.9 average yards per reception. That's more of like a Mike Williams stat, if anything, when you kind of look at the game lines. So definitely he put the team on his back today. I hope that, as far as going forward, he is okay with, his shoulder injury, the Chargers officially designated it as. But he was able to return to this game, which I think is a positive sign after he walked back to the locker room. So, and scored a touchdown apparently with, the bum shoulder on the 4th and 1 call. So Just a really awesome game from a player where it, like, Justin Herbert's game today, the Chargers needed every ounce from him that they could get.
Yeah, him versus Amon-Ra was just like the perfect like power slot wide receiver battle, as Nate Tice, I think, who's the one who coined that, likes to say. And yeah, I mean, it's been nice to see him turn back the clock. I do hope he's okay and he can play next week, because I feel like with those shoulder things, I know you're a med student, so you probably know more than me, but like you just go back in, you take a shot of whatever painkiller, and you just go back out and but we've seen, I think, other players go through that, like Josh Palmer with his knee injury in the Bears game, goes out, comes back in at the end, and then he just goes on IR after. So like, how concerned would he be? Like, I don't know if Jameson's in the chat, but like, do you think that could be a case where he just got, a shot of whatever painkillers were there, and then he might miss some time during practice, or do you think he'll be out there for Green Bay?
It's possible. I mean, if he had like broken his collarbone in this or something, like he would not have come back into that game. So I do think it's probably a bit of a pain management thing. I also think he got clearly like a bit winded with all of the running he was doing today. I think that was part of why he went back as well. Probably some kind of shoulder stinger or something like that. I can't speak to the Chargers medical staff and what happened in the locker room or what he got shot up with. But clearly it was pretty effective in terms of how he played today. So I just thought it was, I honestly just, he kind of like deserves a lot better, as people are saying in the chat. And
yeah, dude, they had at the end of the game, they were like panned on him like 3 times, right as the Lions are driving. He had this like just depressed state of what's the term? Just like, yeah, he was just such he was just in a very depressed state. It seemed like anytime he was talking with anyone, like that whole performance just went to waste because Chargers couldn't get a stop.
Yeah, no, and it feels like that's kind of what the season has been, because of the as we said, the defense kind of wasting some of these offensive performances, or when the defense plays well, the offense doesn't play well, et cetera, et cetera. We talked about the lack of like complementary football. So I definitely think when Derwin and Herbert had the games they had today and you can't win, like that's just something that's going to cost the Chargers down the road whenever they're, I'm sure, probably around that, let's say 9-8, 10-7 mark, as a team that's trying to kind of creep into that wild card position, right? So yeah, a game like that certainly cost you today. And I think Keenan, especially being on a Chargers team for so long that has been like on that playoff border for like what feels like a decade, in that wild card positioning, like he knows everyone counts. And so to kind of have your performance today, like a little bit rejected, by the world in terms of what the defense did, I'm sure that can't be a great feeling. Any other notes that you had on the offense?
Yeah, just in terms of pressure numbers, initially. So Pipkins allowed 5, Sawyer allowed 3, Clapp and Zion allowed 1, and then Slater allowed 0. So a nice bounce back from Slater after what was probably his worst performance of his career last week.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was a really good game from Rashawn Slater on the whole. So it was nice to see that from him. Nice bounce back game from the offensive line. Again, another aspect of the offense.
Pass blocking wise, not
well, the run game wise, that's just an assumed value at this point. Like when we started talking about the offense, you said I forgot to mention the run game, and it's like, not really. I just didn't mention the run game or didn't want to. I definitely thought this was a bounce back game from pass protection standpoint, which is something that you're going to need going forward. Like if this team is going to kind of make some type of playoff run or something like that, you need Slater playing at this level as opposed to what he had been playing, dealing with that ankle injury. So much better game from him and the offensive line as a whole. Trying to think of like, this is the most like stone smart targets I think I've ever seen in a game. Outside of maybe one of the ones from earlier this year, but they really seem to try to get him involved at some points, which I thought was a little bit surprising that he ended up with one more target than Donald Parham. Nick Van Ant, how many tight end snaps did we have today? I'm curious to keep track of that.
Parham 29, Everett 24, Smart 21, and then Vanette 11. Van Ness had a
Yeah.
pretty good on the Eckler's, like his longest rush on the sprint out of the sprint
Yeah,
option.
yeah.
Van Ness was out there. Like he made a really nice block on, I think, the corner that kind of sprung that hole like that Eckler hit. So yeah, if that was McKitty, it's probably holding or some type of penalty.
Man, I'm just hoping for 1 week where we can get the primary like blocking tight end out of the bottom 5 PFF grades. And if
Yeah.
Vanette had that game today, that's all we need, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'll say don't be too surprised if
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
So that might be a little preview of the numbers tomorrow. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think again, this was like a really great bounce back effort from the offense, really in every aspect other than the run game, which is going to be a problem that we talk about going forward. But yeah, I mean, it sucks that we don't get to talk about it more, or that we didn't get to lead the show talking about it because of what happened on defense. But yeah, so I think that's gonna. Do you have any other notes on this game in general?
No.
Okay, well, we'll get to some of your guys' super chats. I will read the ones that I am allowed to read. This one comes from @Captain Coke. It's so sad to watch Justin Herbert go through what Rivers went through. All of this is so bad. Even Fouts was ruined. Which is, I mean, it's true to watch Herbert have this kind of a game. Like it did stink to not see him get to win that one, as we've seen many times in his career. It felt like the best ending for him would have been like that Browns game ending from a couple of years ago.
That Browns ending only happened because the defense got a stop.
Yeah.
I don't know the last time they've gotten a stop like that.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just difficult just to see, one stop. Like that's all you need. And, for people that have been watching CJ Stroud in Houston having this, rookie run that he's having, like the defense has been able to get at least one stop over there in his last couple of games and has made some plays for him. And so when you have like this talent at quarterback, and we've seen this for the Staley defense over a number of years, and I guess you can go back to that Gus Bradley defense in Herbert's rookie year, for them to not play to that level in some games and not have the complementary football, like it does kind of stink on the whole.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we'll get to this one from +1. I'm too broke from a super chat, but do you think the Chargers can still make the playoffs?
No, I don't. I think now that they're 4 and 5, I'm gonna use my friends at Sumer Sports. If you don't follow them on Twitter, please do. But they have like a playoff probability thing, like a leverage thing, and they said if the Chargers lost this game, they would only have a 24.4% chance to make the playoffs, which I wholeheartedly think is a fair number. The entire AFC North is pretty much in the playoffs, or I think the Texans might be the 7th seed now, but I just like this defense isn't good enough to get there. Offense is pretty banged up. Even if Herbert carries, I think there's going to be too many games where the defense lets up too many points and he won't be able to kind of outscore them. So at this point, I don't see them making the playoffs. They're probably going to be stuck in like an 8-9, 9-8 type record and miss the playoffs by a hair.
Yeah, I kind of think the same way at this point. I think this was a big like swing game, right? Like if they had won this game and you're at 5 and 4, I think you're feeling a lot better about like playoff odds and maybe being able to beat up on maybe some of these like Green Bay Raiders, like Denver games. And not that that's 3 free wins as we've seen with the Chargers this year, but like those are certainly some more winnable games on your schedule. But losing this one, having the Ravens come up, the Bills obviously coming up as well. I feel like we can kind of pencil in Ravens as Bills as 2 more losses.
Yep.
And now you're at 7, and you're probably able to take maybe 1 more loss at best, assuming, the AFC North teams, get 8 losses maybe. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, I don't know. I feel like they need a lot of help, certainly in the AFC. And I just don't trust them to go wire to wire like I have with Chargers teams in the past. I kind of trusted last year's team to some extent to a like much higher degree to like be in these games and at least somewhat like finish them, especially with kind of the defensive performances to some extent Staley had down the stretch. Some of them were like Mickey Mouse games against Nick Foles, but like, you know, we'll give that to him.
They were.
But you know, I do think that, you know, the defense in the state that it is without a way to improve it, the run game and like that in the state that it is without a way to improve it, just it makes it hard. All right. All right. I guess I have to read this one because he paid money. Why do the Chargers suck? Hashtag Harbaugh season. Harbaugh season?
Harbaugh season. No comment.
After all the investigations. But I don't know. I mean, getting to the question, like, I think this is kind of the frustrating thing that we talked about, like at the beginning of this episode, where, you know, as far as the offense is concerned, just like there hasn't been that complementary football from game to game, and like for there to be like one phase of the team that is off, you know, that certainly goes back to like the coaching on the whole. But you know, you just don't see these teams that are playoff contenders have like these off days as much, whether it's the offense kind of being bad like it was against, you know, I would say Dallas probably, which was Herbert's worst game, and to some extent the Kansas City game as well. And then also now you're having these defensive performances like we haven't seen against the Lions, and we've seen earlier in the season as well. So I don't know. It's tough. Nick Norvis asked, yeah, is Corey Linsley done? So people have just been asking for updates on Linsley, but there really is no update other than Staley, what he said at his press conference, I think this week, which, you know, if you read between the lines about the quote of him kind of transitioning to being a coach, as well as the Bridget Condon report about Linsley watching film in the room with the guys, like, I think you can put 2 and 2 together about the heart condition and like whether he's coming back this year. I think it's pretty clear at this point that Linsley probably is not coming back. So I don't know. And it's a big loss for the line. Louise Broen, like probably the wrong question to ask this show, but I guess they were still bad at the run game. Any ideas on why the offensive line has regressed so much?
That's a tough question. Like, honestly, like even with Linsley, I didn't think the run game was looking good at all outside of the Dolphins game. I don't really have a great answer for you there. I'd kind of direct you to Steven, who's probably a little bit better at assessing offensive line play. I guess the one thing would be like in the run game, they also don't get any production from their tight ends. Like their tight ends suck at run blocking. They have like the second lowest run blocking grade as a tight end unit overall. So I think that could be part of it in terms of the run game. I think in pass pro, they've looked okay at times. They've struggled against the really good units. And I don't think at this point, like we can't chalk it up to like, oh, they've played some good defensive fronts. Like they have had a large enough sample size of playing both. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for you there, but I think it's probably just, they just haven't been playing well. And I think that's the easiest answer to go with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just stinks considering what the expectations were, and we see that you know, offensive line play varies from like year to year, like in the league, unless you have like one of those true like elite ones, like the Lions seem to have, or we've seen the Eagles and the Chiefs at the top of the league. But if you're anyone else and you have like a hole in your offensive line, or you just have like kind of some variable performances from year to year, or like the injury to Slater, like it's harder to stay at the top when you don't have that like foundation to some extent. So I think that's kind of the tough part of this game. Trying to see if there's any other comments. I guess we'll take a couple more questions. Who's the best run blocker on the Chargers? It's the question. Is it probably
Slater?
Yeah, probably. I mean, generally that's been the trend, that the runs have been successful. And yeah, I guess we can kind of start to wrap it up here. But yeah, after the slow start on offense, the radio broadcast said that Herbert got hot on the sideline. After that, he had 4 touchdowns, one of the few positives. Yeah, I think like we've said, all podcasts like this should have been kind of the game where, Herbert takes you over the top, and he did everything he could and more. Unfortunately, just didn't get the chance to have the ball last. Not his fault in that way, but I hope that and this Chargers team, frankly, in its current state with defense, is going to need it. They're going to need a big Herbert game next week, even to win probably on the road in Green Bay. They're probably going to need one, certainly going to need one against the Ravens if they were to have any real shot at winning that game. So yeah, just really difficult to see Herbert lose this game kind of in the way that he did, and kind of like you mentioned with the Keenan Allen thing. So yeah, I guess that'll do it for us tonight. Kind of stinks that they didn't win this game, but Arjun, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, last thing, I think the one thing that the Chargers need to work on, they need to try to improve Justin Herbert's leadership and it factor. I think he just doesn't do a good enough job of leading this defense to not allow 41 points. This has been a trend, I think, throughout his entire career. So
are you saying he doesn't have enough dog in him?
Yeah, he doesn't have that. He doesn't have that dog in him. He doesn't.
No.
He just doesn't. He doesn't lead. He doesn't will his defense to get game-changing turnovers or big plays against good offenses. So if there's one thing he needs to improve on, it's his leadership and his inspiration ability, because obviously playing with a broken finger and a busted lip during the middle of a game is not enough to inspire your defense to go out and get one stop in the second half. So yeah, that'd be the one thing, my biggest takeaway from that game. But otherwise, I thought he played pretty well.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, I mean, he played very well. All right, well, that'll wrap it up for tonight. I guess we'll wrap it up on this one. From Patrick, Alex makes no sense. He's so dumb, not even a Chargers fan. Welcome back. I'm glad to be back on the live stream, everybody. But we'll leave it off on that one. Steven and Tyler will be back on the Chargers channel sometime this week, I assume, doing a preview of next week and doing a wrap-up of this game as well. So I know Steven's probably going to get back late tonight, so I wish him a good day of school tomorrow. Same for Tyler as well. Disappointing after what happened tonight. I have an exam tomorrow. Arjun, I'm sure, is doing school stuff as well. But we'll be back to covering the team throughout the week, hoping for a bounce back win, maybe against the Packers. That's at Lambeau, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So got to get a bounce back win. Got to get back to 500 for the 3rd time this year. So hopefully the Chargers can do that next week. Saw the improvement in the offense, and definitely need to see some improvement from the defense going forward. So without any further ado, that'll do it for us tonight, and see you guys next week.